Some of the content contained in this podcast may prove challenging to some listeners. Discretion is advised. Please contact a member of your local support group or a relevant and accredited support organisation if affected and help is required. Hello, and welcome to My Service, My Story Vietnam, a collaborative podcast between the Warragul RSL and the Warragul and Druin Gazette. My name is Nicholas Duck. I am a journalist for the Warragul and Druin Gazette, and joining me today is Warragul local and Vietnam veteran Alan Eade. Alan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Nick.
No worries. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here too. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we will get straight into it, and we'll start at the very start, just before you served in Vietnam. I want you to sort of tell me about your life pre-Vietnam, where you grew up in, your childhood a bit, where you went to school, what you were doing just before you went over.
Yeah, sure, Nick. Well, firstly, I went to Essendon North State School, 4015. You might think, how the hell would I know that? Well, it's something that stuck in my head for 70 odd years. And from there I went to Nidri Tech School, which is near Essendon North. And then from there I went to, my mum and dad bought a farm in Warragul, and I went to Warragul Tech School. And from there, of course, I left there and joined Anchortel Motors as a panel beater, and that's where I started work pre-army days, of course. Mm. That was now. I played a bit of football during that time. Not very. I wasn't a James Hird by any means, but I did play a bit of football and enjoyed that. But my working life, as I say, did start at Anchortel Motors in Druin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll look to when, because you were conscripted into service.
Yes, indeed, I was. Yes.
Yeah. Mm. Do you want to start by telling me just a bit about that?
Well, conscription was a big thing in them days, of course, and many other conscripted soldiers wasn't that happy about it, to be perfectly honest. I wasn't fussed about being in the army, and my family was a little bit disturbed, for the main reason, they're most concerned about what happens in the army and what can happen to you in the army, and of course that's always a concern. But my father was more than angry about the whole thing. He didn't like it at all. But anyway, we joined up the army and made the best of it with what we had. Yeah. And didn't resent it, but we didn't love it either. So. Yeah.
Had your family had any history of service? Had your father served at all? Had anyone in your family served?
Yes, he did, Nick. My father went to New Guinea for a while back in the day, and he came home. Well, when finished, obviously, but I don't think he was that excited either, to be honest. So that was about the story at that time. Was what we all done. I was only one of many soldiers at that stage.
Well, could you tell me a bit about your life when you were conscripted? Were you in a relationship at all?
No, I was very free and fancy free. Is that what it is? Something like that, anyway. Yeah, no, I wasn't. No, none whatsoever. Until perhaps later on during the early days in the army, where we got together with my wife at the time. Not at the time, but now we're engaged and got married. Back in about 1969, we got married. In fact.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was married during the army days. Yes.
Well, that's quite a story. Actually, was that a common thing that men that were in training for Vietnam sort of?
Yeah, I think it was to a degree because if you're married, you got a bit more moolah at that stage. No, it wasn't a fortune, mind you, but it was more than what it would have been if you're just a single soldier. But that wasn't the only reason, of course. It's because that's what you've done, but not the most important one, certainly.
How long were you seeing your now wife for before you married?
6 months. It wasn't one of those sort of weddings, but it was a 6 month engagement, and we were married mid 69.
Yeah, which was the year before you went over to Vietnam, wasn't it?
No, that was after I came back to get married. And,
right.
Yeah, okay. So it was during the time in Vietnam, in fact.
How did that, I guess, your service affect that aspect of your life? Did you sort of get married, I don't know, a bit faster because of it?
Well, it doesn't sound very good to be a 6 month relationship and get married, but that wasn't the reason by any means. But yeah, it was a bit of a worry to everyone concerned, especially my wife and myself. You're stuck over there, well, you don't know whether you're going to come back okay or not. So not like quite a few others, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Well, looking forward a bit, so once you were conscripted and once you were training, can you talk about training a bit? What was that like?
Yes, Nick. Well, firstly, of course, when you get conscripted, you go to Puckapunga, which is a training camp for recruits, which were there for, I think it was 12 weeks, I think it was at the time. And then we got sent out to our corps training, which was infantry for me, but there's other ones, there's Ramey and so on and so forth. And then we, from there, we did to 1ARU, which was a holding unit for soldiers to replace soldiers in Vietnam. And from then, we went to Canungra, which was a jungle training facility, which were there for a couple of weeks to learn all the tricks of jungle warfare and all this sort of thing. Mm. And then we come back to Sydney to Liverpool, and then just waited to get shipped out to Vietnam.
How was training for you? Did you take to it all right? Was it a bit difficult for you?
The corps training, infantry corps training was quite hard. That was at Singleton. Mm. That was pretty hard for 12 weeks, running up and down hills and all this sort of business. That was pretty heavy going. You get used to it because you're a lot fitter. Most of us embraced it, but some of us didn't like it, but I was okay with it.
So when you came out of training, did you feel prepared at all for what you were going to experience over in Vietnam?
Oh, well, I don't think anyone's prepared, to be perfectly honest. I think you landed there and you just did whatever you had to do. But there's a lot of things when you get overseas, they're not the same as they are here. There's more pressure over there, of course, and once again you adapt to what you have to do, and I think we all did that pretty well, really, to be honest. Mm. There's not many people that didn't. Before
you started training, had you ever picked up a gun before?
Only to shoot rabbits. That's about as good as it got. Not at all. Well, German training we did, of course, obviously, but before that, no. Probably an air rifle and a 22 would be the only thing we ever fired.
So when you were heading over to Vietnam, what were your expectations of what you would find over there?
Well, we're going to be jungle soldiers, so I assumed that that's what we'd be doing. After I got shipped from 1ARU in Vietnam to my battalion, which was 8RA, 8th Royal Australian Regiment, expected to be a rifleman at that stage, which I was. After that went on, we progressed to a machine gun, which I carried one of those for nearly 9 months. All those things are all different to what I would have been used to back in Australia, but we did that okay, and once again we survived okay, so it was all right.
Can you go into that role that you just said, being a rifleman? What did that entail once you were over in Vietnam? What were you doing as part of that role?
Well, we used to do a fair bit of 2 or 3 stages we used to do in 8RA, but mainly we were ambush people. But prior to that, we used to do a lot of bushwalking. Like out in the Bin Bar rubber, for instance, which was rubber trees and rubber plantations, and did Long Highway Mountains, which was, well, mountains obviously. We did a lot of that, but mainly it was towards the end of our tour, we did a lot of ambushing, which was ambushing around Bin Bar, as I mentioned, around Berea, which is little places in around Nui Dat. We did that a fair bit, rice paddies, we did that a fair bit. So we did quite a lot of ambush work. So
just going back a little, when you first arrived in Vietnam, now I believe you went to Nui Dat, is that where everyone was stationed? Yeah. What were your first impressions when you arrived? I said, what the hell are we doing here for? There's dirt tracks, dust, hot as hell. You get settled into your little tents, and the whole thing you get used to. You don't have to like it, but you get used to it, and you make the best of what you got. But yeah, it was quite daunting, to be honest. I mean, you've got no idea what you're going to do next. What were the living conditions like? I know you mentioned tents.
Well, they're tents, but the mess was a mess. Well, it was a mess half the time, but we just had our lunch and dinner and tea and all that sort of thing at the army mess. Yeah, it's not like home, don't get me wrong, but it's okay.
What was the food like? I'm assuming it wasn't exactly 5-star gourmet.
Well, no, it wasn't that, but look, it was okay. It wasn't too bad. We had a few meals that weren't so hot, but you get that at home, don't you, at times?
Had you ever been outside of Australia before you travelled to Vietnam?
No, I don't think so. Since Vietnam, we've been back to Vietnam, and we've been to Singapore. We've been there a couple of times, Cook Islands, but not prior to Vietnam, no.
Did it fill you with any? I mean, obviously, heading into a war, you're not exactly there to be a tourist. But did the prospect of heading to outside of Australia for the first time, was that something that gave you a bit of excitement, or were you nervous about it?
Oh, during the war trip, it was a bit daunting, but after that, it didn't worry me one little bit. No, I used to go overseas. We did a few times, but I'm a fairly casual sort of a bloke, I must admit. But that's what I like to be, rather than a bit uptight about everything.
Was there anything that struck you when you first arrived in Vietnam? Something that really hit you as being very different to Australia?
Yeah, well, when we landed at Tonsanut, which is Saigon at the time, it's changed names now, but the American aircraft, just hundreds of them, like bombers and choppers, that was daunting. Probably a couple of miles of aircraft. And the firepower that these aircraft would have had, bombers, hundreds of them. It's just amazing. Where we fly around in little caraboos and they're flying around in great big airships and God knows what.
Yeah, and not being from the background of, service or whatnot, that would have been the first time that you'd seen anything like that.
Yeah, we used to go to the Labatouche and see a few of the tiger moths running around, but that's as good as it ever got. But over there was just a total different thing altogether.
How old were you when you first arrived in Vietnam?
22.
That's a pretty crazy thing to be doing at 22 years of age.
Yes, not one you'd like to give your own kids to do, but that's what we'd have to do.
No, well, I was just thinking on what I was doing at age 22, and I can't really imagine flying over to Vietnam and doing that sort of thing.
It'd be a bit different, I guess, yeah.
No. So, moving forward to once you did join your battalion and set out, what was an average day like for you as a rifleman? What was it like being out there?
Well, I went out as a rifleman back in the early days of AIDRA when I joined there, was out in the bush mainly, probably a couple of months. Not all at once, but over a period of 2 or 3 months, we'd be out for probably a fortnight or 3 weeks at a time. And the choppers would take us out, or trucks, depending where we're going. And then we just carted all your food and all your stuff on your back, and just rations, dry rations mainly, which they were. But then again, sometimes the Red Cross had come out with coffees and teas and chains of socks and gear, so that was good. They were very good, to be honest, really good.
Now,
Nick, they used to bring out letters from home, which was also reassuring. Perhaps in the older days that wouldn't have happened back in the other war areas, but that was good.
Yeah. Who did you have writing to you from home?
My wife and a couple of friends, but my wife most of the time, yeah.
Was that always something that you were looking forward to?
Oh yes, that's all you had to look forward to. Yeah, wasn't much else, that's for sure.
Well,
we did. Yeah, we did. We looked forward to. Yeah, I'd write as much as I could, and she'd write most days actually.
Now, Vietnam, obviously, you said you were in the jungle a lot, and from what I understand, the average experience of a soldier was a battle as much with the terrain and the surroundings as it was with everything else. Can you talk to me a bit about what it was like in that sort of environment, heavy bush, walking in some of the most extreme conditions you can imagine? Yeah,
they were extreme, some of them, but more specifically was bamboo. Like, you think bamboo's no big deal, but when you see it with big spikes on them, an inch long, they just cut your clothes to pieces, and that was hard going. And all the soldiers used to carry secateurs to chop their way through this jungle. Why we ever went through there for, you never know. No one could live there. But that's what we used to do, and try and look out for bunker systems, which we found a couple of those. Fortunately, they weren't active, which was good, because they were frightening things to see them. When you just go through the bush and see a bunker system, if there's anyone in there, they could have just let you have it, you would have been gone. Wouldn't have had a hope. But luckily for me, we never found any active ones, so that was all right.
How many men did you set out with in your battalion?
Battalions take about, section was about 12, and there's 4 sections to a company, 4 times 12, about 50.
48.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Yeah, that was our battalion, which the D company was in AIDRA. But they were mainly not suicide, ambush is what I'm trying to say, yeah. And that was our main focus back in the latter half of our tour.
Well, you touched on briefly the bunkers and not knowing whether you'd be finding any of the enemy there. I suppose, can you describe what it was like wandering through this terrain that you're unfamiliar with, essentially not knowing when an attack might come? I mean, that must have been I can't even imagine it, really.
Yeah, no, that is. It was always a thing on your mind to go through the areas that we're not familiar with, as you mentioned, and just to see the bunker that's quite large. They're not just like a rabbit hole. They're quite big, and if they're armed with anyone in there, it'd be frightening. But as I say, fortunately, the ones we did see weren't active, so I was happy about that. I can tell you that now. Very relaxed.
What was it like when you got to night time and you all set up camp and you were all keeping watch? I imagine that...
Yeah, well, that's another thing too. At the night time, of course, we used to ambush overnight, and we'd set our claymore mine, or better know about those, claymores and machine gunners, which I was one of them, just set up this area, and if anyone was walking past, that was our enemy. So, because the enemy had curfews between 6 o'clock of the night time right through to 6 o'clock in the morning. Anything after those times were fair game. Now, the Vietnamese people and the soldiers and Viet Cong would know their curfews and they'd abide. Well, if they weren't, they'd be fair game. So that's how we worked it all. That was common knowledge, of course, in them days.
And what was it like when you did ambush someone? Can you walk me through what that was like?
Oh, well, they'd walk through and the claymores there'd be other soldiers as well, not just me. There'd be 10 or 12 soldiers guarding this walk track, if you like, whether it be in the rubber or in the rice paddies, and they just detonate the claymore mines and the machine guns and let fly as well. So it was quite horrific. I was lucky enough. I never had too many contacts in that area. I had a couple, but not as many as perhaps some did. But it's probably a safer way for the soldiers to fight rather than run through the jungle every 5 minutes. A lot easier, a lot safer.
Do you recall at all what might have been going through your mind during those times that you did have contact? Because I'd imagine you'd have so much adrenaline pumping through you at that time.
You sort of hope to God you don't have any contacts, to be perfectly honest. But if you did, well, you just had to put your head down and bum up and hope for the best, really. But as you say, it's quite frightening, no doubt about it.
What about the weather and the climate that you had to battle? Because obviously Vietnam has a very different climate to what you might be used to here in Australia.
Yeah, I was hot like you wouldn't believe, and humid. It's ugly, really ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sweat from daylight till the dark, during the...
Carrying your packs as well.
Yeah, they were always 70 or 80 kilograms or more. Well, more, I think they are. I think it's more, 80 or 90 pound, some of them. And being a machine gunner, we had ammunition as well. So it was quite heavy, but they were hard going.
And what about the wildlife as well? Because obviously there are a few dangerous animals out in the jungle.
Yeah, we didn't see I've seen a couple of snakes, but the night time they used to worry. But one bloke got tackled by the night time viper or something. But yeah, no, I didn't see any tigers or anything like that though. But well, I didn't see anything really other than a few snakes maybe. That's all. Not
a fan of snakes?
Not that excited about them. No.
Not keen to get up and personal. That's for sure.
No, I know Bobby. Steve Irwin's son, not his name, Bobby Irwin, no, not at all.
Goodness, I don't think any of us are. Now, there are a couple of stories I suppose I wanted to bring up and I was hoping you might chat about. They're in your book that you've provided us just with some of your background detail. One of them was an incident involving a sniper that I believe I read about. Do you recall this story at all?
Geez, I think it might have been a made-up story, is it? No, I'm not sure about that one.
There might have been a story about you and a few of the fellas sitting in a circle and one of you got grazed on the cheek.
Oh, that was... Yeah, I beg your pardon. Yeah, no, we were out... he did too. We were out in the middle of the bush just relaxing pretty much, and all of a sudden he went down with a graze. Yeah, he did get shot by someone. No one ever seen it, but it could have been anywhere. But it did get grazed. Yes, you're right. I forgot about that, to be honest. But yeah, he got shipped out again by a chopper. Yeah, I forgot about that. I'm sorry about that, Nick.
It's all right.
Big story. Well, it's a true story. It's true.
That must have been a pretty scary moment, though.
Yeah, well, you're sitting there minding your own business, having a smoke or do whatever we're doing, and he goes down. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you wonder what the hell's going on.
The other one I wanted to mention was about, I believe, an American helicopter.
Yeah, that was in Long Son Island. We were over there for a while. The choppers flew over and seen movement. Of course, they opened fire because they thought we were the enemy, but we weren't. We're the good guys. So they let smoke bombs go off and all this, which the chopper pilots can differentiate between the goodies and the baddies. But anyway, he fired first and asked questions later. But yeah, we survived that one all right as well.
No one got hurt?
Yeah, one bloke got his ankle. He was a Vietnamese scout actually. He got his leg damaged a bit in the lower leg, but they shipped him out as well. So that's what they do. It was good. Like the choppers were only 10 minutes away, and you're out of there, so it's not so bad. Well, if you get hurt, it's not so good, but could be worse. Yeah.
Mm. And what were the conditions like when you were out there? I suppose from a hygienic point of view, because you said you were sweating at all times of the day. I can't imagine you'd have too many baths or showers. I imagine there was a few smells going around.
Yeah, quite odorous at times. But no, we'd never have a shower till you come back home, back to camp, which is, probably 2 or 3 weeks' time. You might have a shower. Well, you would have a shower then, of course. And shaving was a little bit short too at that time. Oh, we all looked pretty rough and ready, no doubt about it.
How was it when you finally got back to camp and you got to hop in a shower?
Oh, well, we used to have a good hot shower and a good feed and had a couple of beers most of the time and all ready for the next one, which is probably another week's time. Or we might go down to Vung Tau and have a bit of a rest down there for a couple of days if the OC felt as though that's what we needed. But that wasn't all guaranteed. But sometimes we went down there and had a few beers down there. But that was about it, yeah.
Yeah, well, on the topic of, having beers as a group, the blokes that you went out there with and were out there with at all times, I mean, what was it like building relationships with them? Yeah,
look, we used to have little cards that used to 2 cans a day. But I might have had one occasionally, but they used to get my chips to get extra beer, which I give them. It didn't worry me.
Yeah.
But I might have had one or two sometimes, but not all the time. A bit like today, actually.
Well, was it like, being out there with those blokes? I mean, the relationships you must have forged in that sort of conditions.
Yeah, well, you do at the time. It's a bit like when you play football. You have mates that you rely on, and the army is probably no different. You rely on the people you work with, and you hope they do the right thing by you, which they do, and that's how the relationship evolves. Mm. They all look after the best they can, and that's what they do.
Yeah.
That's where Australian diggers have got the name of look after your mates, and that goes today. Even today, they're still the same.
Well, I know from my perspective, at least, growing up in primary school, when we learn about the Anzacs and the soldiers, we talk a lot about the idea of mateship and how that's a strong, aspect of service. When in Australia, did you feel that when you were over in Vietnam?
Yeah, yeah, certainly. They're all for one and one for all. Yeah, it's what you read about is pretty much what it is. They are your mates, and that's what you stick by. And as I say, the same today is no different. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Oh, you're always going to get someone you don't like. Well, that's the same as anything. You walk down the street, you see some idiot you don't like, so it's no different.
Yeah.
But collectively, it's fine. Yeah.
Mm. So while you were over there serving, was there anything that took you particularly by surprise? Was there anything that coming in you had expectations of and might have shocked you in any way?
Oh, no, well, the only thing that shocks you is their lifestyle of the Vietnamese people. They're a lot far different to what we do here. They run around with 3 or 4 kids and totally different to us. And it's a bit of a shock to see them, to be honest, because you don't know what you're going to get into. Mm. You see all these little rickshaws running around, and that's the way they've been living for hundreds of years, so it's no different.
What was the reception like when they'd see you coming through?
Oh, yeah, they were happy to see us. Oh, yeah, because they were very happy to see us because they didn't want the Viet Cong in their areas either. Mm. But it's a bit hard to differentiate between the Viet Cong that look the same as the Vietnamese, except they got different beliefs. That's probably the only difference. But we're happy to be there. Well, we weren't happy to be there, but when we were there, we were happy to talk to them, happy to be with them. Oh yeah, we had a few scouts that were Vietnamese, and they couldn't speak much lingo, but they were okay. No trouble with them. Mm.
So, once you came to the end of your tour, how were you feeling once the end was in sight and you could see a path back to Australia?
Oh, well, you could hardly get on the plane quick enough I come home on the ship. But, yeah, when it's over, you're pleased to see it all. You wave a ta-ta, goodbye, and that's it. Yeah, we're pleased to get home, no doubt about that, the whole lot of us. We come home on the Sydney or the Melbourne? Sydney, on the aircraft carrier. So we've done that, and we're very happy to be home. Mm. Which leads me to another area too. You're probably going to ask me anyway, Nick. What we were like on the way home? Well, our company, our battalion landed in Brisbane, and we were a bit like Tom Cruise, bloody rock stars, you know.
Yeah.
But as opposed to in Sydney and in Melbourne, where they got spat on and they got harassed and abused and all sorts of things. But in Brisbane, we were stars. We're really excited to be home, and you walk down the streets and there's people you've never seen. They were very happy to see you. So for me personally, I was very, very proud to be an Australian soldier at that stage.
Yeah.
And we were treated like royalty, really.
Yeah.
So I got no qualms at all.
Just for my own curiosity, why was the reception in Brisbane so different to what it was elsewhere?
Well, I can't tell you that, Nick, to be honest, but our battalion was based in Brisbane, or in Enoggera actually. So whether that had any difference because they were homegrown soldiers in Brisbane, I'm not sure about that. But I know Sydney and Melbourne they were a bit angry at sometimes. That's going back in about 71 or 71 I think it would have been. So I'd finished in 71, the whole war had finished in 71. Gough Whitlam pulled the pin on all that, so that was good. I don't know why it was different, but it was. So, not that I marched in Melbourne or Sydney, I might tell you that, but I did in Brisbane. So
no, fair enough. So you might not have experienced that, I guess, backlash to the war that a lot of returned servicemen might have felt.
Exactly, yeah. We're fine in Brisbane. Well, me personally, I certainly was, and but Sydney and Melbourne, I don't particularly know, other than they got a bit angry there at times.
So what was it like when you came back home, settling back into civilian life? What was that like? I understand that your job as a panel beater wasn't held over for you, was it?
No, it was not. No, that was another issue that was a serious issue. Just rewinding back when I went to Anchortels, I got the sack halfway during the apprenticeship, which took off like a lead balloon, as you can imagine. But looking back now, I really should have. I was only a kid at that stage, only like you, Nick, for God's sake. But you know, I got the sack because I was a national serviceman, so they didn't have to keep me job when I come back home. So that was a bit of a thing. Looking back now, I should have got a bit angry and got a bit fair dinkum with them, but my father was very, very cheesed off with the whole thing. But anyway, looking back now, that's all water under the bridge, and it's been okay ever since.
Well, I was going to ask you what it was like seeing your family once you got back. I mean, your wife that you'd been away from.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't answer that question. Yeah, no, look, it was very exciting to be home. To be honest, we had no kids at that stage, but we have now, of course, obviously. But no, it was good to be home and good to see my brothers and me, mum and dad and everyone else. It was good, really good. That's what 70 odd years ago, or 60 years ago anyway. Yeah, it's a long time ago.
I mean, it's hard to speak for someone else, I know, but what do you think that was like for your wife, I suppose? You know, seeing you off, not being 100% sure that you'd be coming home again. I mean, that must have been... Yeah,
that would have been hard on her too. Although I know it was hard on her because it was, we were only young at that stage, but not we are now. But yeah, it was very exciting for us both, to be honest, because as I say, I've been away for a while, and she was happy to see me. I'm sure she was. Well, I know she was. She told me. She told me that, so I'm happy with that too. Yeah. Really good. Yeah, no, it was good to be home, and very happy to be home.
I know you said you personally didn't experience maybe the backlash that Vietnam had as a war, but obviously you knew it was going on. What did you think of it at the time? The fact that there were servicemen coming back and getting that kind of reception. Yeah,
I don't know. It's I replaced 2 soldiers that got killed, actually. It's just rewinding a fair bit.
No, that's all right.
Go back too far. But, yeah, I replaced 2 soldiers that were killed. That's how I joined up with 8th Row at that time. That was a big deal. I used to wear their clothes, their boots, the whole lot, you know.
Sorry, their clothes had belonged to them?
Yeah, belonged to them, yeah. They got cleaned and they had numbers on them. I had his shirts and trousers and boots and all sorts of things. But
gosh, what'd you make of that?
Oh, well, at the time it didn't worry me too much. But looking back, wearing dead people's gear, it's probably a bit horrendous, to be honest. But
yeah, well, I'm just sitting here having had no experience with it, thinking, my goodness.
Yeah, you'd hardly wear someone's underpants these days, anybody else's, would you? But yeah, that's what we are. But what was the question prior to that, Nick? I'm sorry, you asked me before that. Anyway.
I asked what your opinion was of the reception that the servicemen, the negative reception.
Yeah, well, I don't know about what they thought about it, but clearly they would have been a little bit cheesed off with the whole thing. I mean, they've been running around the bush for a couple of years and come home to sort of that behaviour. It wouldn't be good. But as I said, for me it was good, but because I had a different outlook to what they did. So, yeah, they'd have been really cheesed off, I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, they would be, of course they would be.
Yeah. Did you run into any issues settling back into civilian life, or was it just an easy transition?
No, I was a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, I was very lucky that I didn't have too many issues. Finding a job was a bit of a worry for a little while before I sort of got back into civvy life, but once I did, I didn't think too much of it at all, really.
What job did you end up getting?
Well, I picked up sticks for about 6 months, which was a go-nowhere job. Then I drove a school bus for 10 years. Picked up kids like yourself, Nick.
Hey,
but back in the day, and then I went back to panel beating myself for a bloke. Then I bought the business, and I've been doing that ever since. Well, not so much now, but until I retired at 65. So, yeah, so I've been in the panel game for quite a while. After I got settled in and got going again, yeah.
So, did you participate in the 87 Welcome Home Parade in Sydney?
No, I did not. No, I do the Anzac things here in Warragul or in Druin, Warragul or Druin, and that's where I don't participate too much in RSL activity. Nothing to do with anything other than that. I do other things, and RSL is. I've been to a few times, but I don't make it an issue at all. Unlike our good friend here, Ben, who lives and breathes it. And he loves it, and good on him. He does a great job. I mean, he's fantastic at it. And Bob's another fellow that does it, and Keith as well. But for me personally, I don't get too involved with it, to be honest.
What about the other people that you served with in your platoon? Do you still see them at all? Do you catch up with them?
Yeah, I see two. A bloke in Maroochydore, he was served with me, and also a bloke over in Perth. He actually was with 7RA. I did a corps training with him, but he joined a different battalion to me. But I see him a few times, and I ring him up. Well, I ring him. He doesn't ring me all that often, I must admit. But anyway, I do that Anzac Day or a couple of times during the year. And I love him to death. He's a great man, and I do see him. Yeah.
Well, it's good to hear that even in the most difficult of circumstances, you can still find those bonds for life. Yeah.
But of all the people I did fight with, they're the only two that I really have much to do with, to be honest. Others, I wouldn't even know their names anymore. As I say, it was 70 years ago, or 60 years ago, so it's a fair while.
No, I don't think anyone could blame you too much for that.
No.
One thing I did want to mention was earlier you were talking about how you have since been back to Vietnam, and I'm just wondering what that was like for you after everything that you did over there. What was it like going back?
Yeah.
When did you go back first of all?
It's about 7 years ago.
7 years ago, yeah.
And we went back to the same routes we went to. Went back to Nui Dat. Well, I didn't even know where we lived in Nui Dat. There's bloody trees everywhere. You wouldn't have a clue where you were. And I got a map and found out where we were and all this sort of business. It really changed. Like Berea, which is only a town probably 5 or 6 k's away from Nui Dat, they've got freeways going through there now, so I mean it's nothing like it was when we was there. They had bullet holes through the roofs and all this, but not anymore. It's all a real town. Yeah. So it's different altogether.
Did it bring back those memories for you?
Yeah, well it did a bit, yeah. It did, yeah, because we used to drive through the town, but just to the left or the right we used to ambush those rice paddies, which are all rice paddies at Berea, and we used to ambush them quite often. So yes, it did, yeah.
Did it bring up memories in a were they all good? Or
no,
memories?
it's not all bad. I mean, you go out there and often you don't do anything other than just man a machine gun all night, or a few of us did, but not as though you're under contact every 5 minutes. That's not what happened, but occasionally you did, but you don't like it, no. I didn't like it at all.
But I mean, I guess going back to Vietnam, as you did 7 years ago, those memories that you experienced were,
they were, some were vivid, but others not so much. But there's memories are all right. And Dat Doe is another place we used to haunt there for a while. They're all around Nui Dat.
Would you go back to Vietnam again?
No. For no real reason. Those Asian countries don't excite me all that much. Whether it be Bali and... I've been to Bali a couple of times too, but those places I wouldn't go again, no.
And, I mean, we've touched a bit on your time with the RSL. Is there any other way, I guess, these days that you sort of maintain your contact with those memories?
Oh, well, no, there's not, Nick, to be honest. No, I don't. I've got no need to. I've got 2 or 3 mates that I do see. Or Terry Gleeson's another one I see. He wasn't with me, but I see him a fair bit. But no, I'm happy to doing what I'm doing, which is not very much in terms of the RSL, I must admit. And I feel as though I should do more, but I don't, for no reason other than I don't.
Well, I think coming in here and talking about your experiences is certainly doing something. Did you want to touch on, I suppose, what it means to share your story and for other veterans to share their stories for future generations to understand, or even current people like myself who just haven't heard these kinds of stories? Yeah,
well, I think a lot of younger people, younger than, well, even you, Nick, they go to Anzac, and they probably don't really understand what it means to be a soldier. And I understand that because you haven't been there, but I think people such as myself who are doing this story, then they can perhaps appreciate what sort of a life it really is in the army. Look, it's not all bad, and most of it is, but a lot of it's quite good. And the comradeship, as you mentioned earlier, is probably the best part of it. Yeah, but I think younger people should know a bit about it, yeah.
Is there anything in particular you think younger people should, or you would want younger people to understand a bit more than they do?
Yeah, I don't know. They go to Anzac. My grandkids go to the parades, Anzac Day especially, and they're all enthralled by it all. And perhaps it's because I'm in the was in the army, so maybe that's the reason. But they seem to be genuinely interested in what I used to do, and that's why I've got that book there that my daughter wrote, because she was keen enough to do it and find out what I did. And like if you're a panel beater all your life, you can't get very excited over that, can you? But army life is exciting in some ways, no doubt about it. Not for everybody.
I think that covers most of the topics that I wanted to cover. Was there anything that you felt might be worth bringing up? Any stories you remember? Anything at all?
Yeah, the only thing I would say in the Army's defence, I don't think the Australian government did enough for returned soldiers. In terms of the gold card, for instance. It's very, very hard to get it. And I think that every soldier that went overseas, especially in a war theatre, should get it just like that. And
so to a layman like myself, what is that?
It's a card, I'm going to show you actually. It's a card that gives you almost free medical, cough, colds and so on and so forth. That's covered by the DVA, which is the gold card basically. And I think every soldier that does, especially overseas activities, should get it without even. I had to go through a lot of hoo-ha to get it without, I didn't particularly want it, but it was there to have, and it took me forever to get it. So I've got it, and I think everyone should get it. And I think most people do get it these days, but back 20 or 30 years ago, it was hard, very hard. You need to be a rocket scientist to figure out what to do, and I wasn't one of them, that's for sure.
Is there anything else that you would like to see the government do to support returned service people?
Oh, well, I think they do a fair bit, to be honest. If you've got issues, if you want to go down to Melbourne, for instance, the DVA will pay that, and a lot of other things that they do pay for, and good on them for that. I'm happy for it, but just to get the gold card, I think, is one area where I think is difficult to get. Perhaps it's easier now to get now than what it was 30 years ago, but that's one area. The other, in closing, Nick, I'd just like to say a little bit off my own bat.
Of course.
I'd just like to thank my family, in particular my 3 girls, for the support that I've had for many years. No, that's all I want to say. Without their support, I'd be ratchet.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for coming in today, Alan, and sharing your experiences. I think it is genuinely valuable. I know I've found it extremely valuable, but I know that many other people are going to find a lot of value in learning about a part of history that maybe they don't know much about, and I want to thank you for opening up as personally as you have.
Thank you, Nick, for the interesting questions. Thank you very much. And I hope they've answered to some degree of quality, put it that way.
You've absolutely done fantastically, mate. All good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, boys.
The Warragul and Druin Gazette and the Warragul RSL would like to thank our guests for sharing their opinions and recollections of their service in Vietnam, as well as their later experiences after returning back into civilian life.